A very warm welcome to today's webinar, Managing Anxiety in Uncertain Times. My name is Dr. Ute Liersch. I am a psychologist, and the following 30 minutes, that is how long the webinar will take, is all about you. What I am going to do, I'm going to take you through some psychological ideas that can help you to manage anxiety, worry, fear, and panic better. I also urge you, whilst you are listening to the webinar, to write down any comments or any questions that might arise during the next 30 minutes. And I can pick those ones up and we can work with them afterwards. Of course, everything is anonymous if you wish, and you can also just sit there, lie back, and hopefully enjoy the webinar, even though we're talking about something as serious as anxiety. What are we going to do? Well, the webinar is based on 3 main points. The first point is for us to learn, for us to become aware of our lived experience of anxiety, worry, fear, and possibly panic. Whilst there might be shared conceptualizations around anxiety, if you want to work with yours, you need to also be aware how your subjective experience is. Meaning, in our first point of the webinar, we will be looking at thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and behavior we are experiencing in a state of anxiety, fear, worry, and/or panic. Once we've done that, we are moving away from our hypothetical, we are moving away from our idea of subjective experience to a more theoretical idea of anxiety. What we are doing here, we are separating hypothetical or diffuse anxiety from concrete anxiety. And we will do that by looking at how they present themselves differently, and also how you can recognize with which anxiety you are in touch at this moment in time. The last part of the webinar is exercises. So what does this mean? It being a short webinar, I would like to offer you 3 very pragmatic exercises. Interventions you can start employing as soon as you notice that anxiety is coming up on you, is rising, possibly even grabs you. And again, for everyone who has just joined the webinar, very warm welcome. You are invited to sit back and just listen. If you have any questions, just pop them into the chat box and we can talk about them after the webinar, which is always around 30 minutes long. So let's go straight into a quote. And the idea is, do we want to get rid of anxiety? And usually we say, we want to get rid of it. It's not a pleasant experience to have. I invite you to think about this. And even go possibly a step further. It is often unhelpful to categorically want to get rid of anxiety. Because anxiety in and of itself tries to tell us something. in order to understand what it wants to tell us, we need to begin to relate to the anxiety, to become curious about the message it has. And one of the effects such relatedness to the anxiety can bring is that it can change how we are living with it. I'm sorry. So how do we do that? We do it by asking ourselves, how do we experience anxiety? And the first step is I'm asking you to think about when you are noticing anxiety, what type of tangible physical sensations are you experiencing? And you might want to write it down. You might just want to think out loudly. It really doesn't matter how you do that experiential exercise. But for a couple of moments, I will not carry on talking. I will give you the space and the time to become aware, to think about how does anxiety manifest itself in my body. People have shared that their physical sensation around anxiety sometimes resembles an angry swarm of bees in their belly. Other people say they have the physical sensation of muscles as hard as rocks. Other people say anxiety goes hand in hand with really bad headaches. You might have a totally different experience, and that is brilliant to notice. Why do I invite you to become aware of your physicality during times of anxiousness? Because we can use these bodily markers to start working with the anxiety before it rises to a level where it might become less manageable. Now let's move on to our understanding of thoughts. And the question I am asking you is twofolded. Firstly, I am asking you to reflect on the content of the thoughts you are having during times of anxiousness. So what are they actually saying? The second part of the question is around how are the thoughts presenting themselves in your mind? And what do I mean by that? Are they loud? Are they quiet? Are they fast? Are they slow? Are they determined? Are they nasty? So the taste of the thoughts. And again, as before, I invite you to either write it down, think out loudly, whatever works for you. What is the content of the thought? And what is the quality of how they present in your mind? I will leave and I will cease talking, leave you alone for a couple of moments again. People experience their thoughts in very different ways. Some people say the content is quite nasty. Other people give examples of very threatening sentences. Some people experience their thoughts as very fast and very judgmental and very loud. Others say it has a menacing whisper. Why do I offer you these different examples? I offer them to you to make you aware there is not a right or wrong way. What we are trying to do here is to get to know your particular lived experience with the anxiety. Why? Again, we want to notice when it starts before it becomes too big and too hard to manage. Getting to know the anxiety allows us to work with it on a different level. So now let's move to the next realm, to the next dimension we are going to reflect upon, which is our behavior, our actions. And you might want to conceptualize this as follows, and I hope I don't scare you with that now. Imagine I am sitting on your shoulder. What would I see you doing? How would I see you behaving when you are anxious? And again, the invitation is to either write it down or to speak it out loudly. How would I see you behaving in the world during an experience of anxiousness, worry, fear, or even panic? Many people share different experiences, and they can be on either side of a huge spectrum. Some people say, when I'm anxious, I feel like I get very slow, I'm dragging my life, I'm dragging my body through space. Others say, I'm just super fast, I'm very clumsy, I'm very hectic. Some people say, my shoulders are up all the time. Others say, my facial expression changes. Some notice that they become quite impatient with others and with themselves. It doesn't really matter what other people say. I am offering you these examples to make you aware that your experience of behavior in the time of anxiety is unique. Again, why am I offering you this part of the reflection in the webinar? Well, on the one side, again, having behavioral markers allows us to work with the anxiety from an earlier beginning, before it grabs us, before it becomes difficult to manage. The other reason is that some of us find it really difficult to note down, to know, to be aware of how the anxiety is manifested in the body and in the thoughts. So you might want to reach out to a person you trust, and you might want to ask them to reflect back to you when they see you being anxious. This does not mean that their judgment must be right. But what you are allowing now is to give yourself a space to stop and to start reflecting. Where am I at this moment? What is the content and the quality of my thoughts? And how does my body feel? Again, all of these exercises in the service of getting to know the anxiety better. And this moves us to the last part, the last dimension of anxiety, which we want to discover today. And that's the dimension of emotions. And you might sit now and start giggling and saying, Ute, really, we are talking about an emotion. Why do you bring in emotions? Because we do know that anxiety can bring many other emotions with it. We do know that quite often, not always, and it might not be true for you, guilt and shame tags along, and or incredible sadness. By reflecting upon what other emotions come, what we are allowing ourselves is to notice that anxiety is not one box only, but it can be multi-layered. And by this awareness, I invite you to bring kindness towards an experience of anxiety as an experience that is difficult. Yet we do not have to get rid of it because it also tells us something. Again, I'm going to be quiet for you to write down. What other emotions do you think you experience when you are worried, feel fear, and or even panic? And look, you might sit here and say, I can't do any of these things. I have no idea how my body feels. No idea about my thoughts. Or you might say, I know what they say, but I don't know their quality. I don't know how I behave when I'm anxious. And for me, the only emotion that is tangible is fear. Every time you are noticing that you do not know, this is a great place to be. Because this is the start of development, right? This is the start of us noticing that we have no data. And this is when data gathering can begin. Why do I say that? Should you sit here thinking, I really don't know how to phrase these things, this might be a start for you to get to know these 4 areas better. Allow me now to move on to a conceptualization of anxiety, which might be a bit binary, but bear with me. Different types of anxiety have different effects on our well-being and mental health. What do I mean with this? We could conceptualize anxiety as diffuse or hypothetical and concrete. Let's start with the diffuse anxiety. That is the one which is not really tangible. It does not really give us a particular thing to worry about, like, for example, what will I make for lunch today? Or how can I go shopping if I have just lost my job? Diffuse goes out of that realm of tangibility and takes us from the small to the vast. It also can have the quality of bringing anxiety into our life much faster. So we worry about more things. We are worrying about them in a much faster way. And the squiggly red line under the word diffuse should be a metaphor for the spiral it can take us on. We are spiraling out of a concrete thought and going into nowhere land, which is only filled with diffuse worry and fear. Another concept of anxiety could be concrete anxiety. These are worries and fears that are really tangible, and I've named 2 already. These are worries and fears we could write down precisely. We could create an action plan around them, and we can work with them and possibly overcome the problem and ticking them off. Don't get me wrong, I'm not indicating here that concrete anxiety is less worrying, because losing a job, not being able to know how to pay the bills, is a very, very difficult place to be. It is a different conceptualization of anxiety, because the diffuse one grabs us, catches us, and pulls us away. Concrete anxiety has some qualities where we can take agency over, where we can work with it. This takes me to the last part of this half-an-hour webinar. Taking you to a different place with worry, fear, anxiety, where I say the art is not to worry, but the art is to worry functionally. And in order to worry functionally, in order to worry functionally, I'm going to offer you a couple of exercises that takes you away from the diffuse worry, so that we can start managing the anxiety. Exercise number 1. Notice when you are falling into hypothetical and diffuse anxiety. When it becomes so much, when you are moving towards worrying about the whole world, possibly then coming to a place where you worry that you cannot worry about the whole world. When you notice that you are on that spiral, you might want to refocus on the problems at hand, particular to your life at the moment. And here focus even more on those you can manage right now. It might be something as small as, how do I create a structure for my day today? If and when you are starting to create a list which is more concrete, you are also giving yourself the information that you still have agency of and in your life, rather than having given the agency to diffuse and hypothetical worry. Exercise number 2. The worry box. Set aside 2 or 3 minutes every day. And this is the time where you allow yourself to worry about everything and nothing. You might even do this exercise as a tangible experience. Take a cardboard box, write the worry on a piece of paper, all of them, and throw them in the box. Remember, the judgment you do is also a worry. Write it, throw it in. Once you reached the end of the time limit you have given yourself, close the box and move to the next thing that you wanted to do. Now let me be very clear. The moving on is not necessarily easy to do. But this is the training you are engaging with the worry box. Is the detachment from the worries, the fears, the anxiety. And moving on to do what you want to do anyway. Exercise number 3. When you notice fear, anxiety, worry coming up, notice also the propensity of wanting to get rid of it. Engage with getting to know what happens as an observer. Observe how your body feels. Observe your thoughts and how they present themselves. Observe your facial expression in the mirror. Observe what other emotions are coming in the toe of anxiety. This exercise trains you to step out of the content of anxiety that grabs you and puts you on a spiral and takes you into a place of the observer, which on a meta level allows you to realize anxiety might be a part of me. It is not me. Thank you very much for coming to the webinar. I really hope you enjoyed it. I know it's a weird thing to say when we talk about anxiety. I also hope you have found a couple of things that are new to you and that you can implement very pragmatically in your life. Allow me to point you to the website, which is ute.care. And there you find many resources around how to manage the situation at the moment and or anxiety, fear. You can also follow me on Facebook and or on Instagram. I would be absolutely and thrilled if you could share the webinar with other people if you found it helpful. I will now stop the slide sharing and wait if you have any questions for me to answer. Thank you very much.